Rock!
What's up, everybody? Just had to stop at the bank for my wife. Let's go down here. So, it's been a little while since I made a vlog. I was on vacation. Went out to Glenwood Springs, Colorado. I had my vacation all booked and all set to go to Estes Park. But if you were following the news and the weather at all, you might know that Estes Park had a little bit of a weather issue, and as with much of Colorado, they had pretty extensive flooding. A lot of roads were washed away, some houses were washed away, businesses got flooded. Luckily, Estes Park didn't get, nobody got killed, believe it or not. That doesn't mean it went particularly well for them. It is a tourist town, and the weekend that I was scheduled to go there was, that was really their last hurrah for tourist weekend for the summer and fall season. It was the weekend after Elk Fest, and both Elk Fest and obviously the next weekend were rained out. Elk Fest is when, so Estes Park is right at the Rocky Mountain National Forest. And there are a lot doesn't even begin to describe the elk population around that area. And during elk rut, they all come down and take over the town. Like literally, if you search like Estes Park and elk on YouTube, there's a BBC video that shows them. They're just all over the town. They're walking the streets. There's elk walking down the sidewalk. It's pretty amazing. And we were supposed to go there the weekend after Elk Fest to check this out. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, so we were trying to figure out other places to go. It turned out to move our ticket to go anywhere else would have cost, basically, it would have doubled the airfare, so we were like, okay, well, where can we go that's still within driving distance of the Denver airport? And on the recommendation of a bunch of other people, we went to Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and man, that was pretty awesome, I gotta tell you. Still a mountain town, still kind of a tourist place, but really different vibe. Really different vibe. Real close to Aspen. We drove to Aspen, I think it was like 35 minutes to get there. I'll tell you what, Aspen, not during ski season, is dead. There is nothing going on in Aspen right now. Like, if you've ever wanted to go to Aspen and see what it's like if aliens came and abducted everyone, that's pretty much what Aspen is like right now. It's crazy. But we went and checked it out anyway, because hey, gotta check out Aspen. A little wheelie there. It was neat. A little, I don't know, I'm a snowboarder, and I had always heard about Aspen, from my friends that skied. And you see about it in movies, and I was really underwhelmed. And I guess maybe the mountain looks bigger when it's covered in snow, but it actually didn't seem like a very big mountain. Now, my background as far as snowboarding comes from New England, so I have all the places I have to compare it to are all the really big places in Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire, which, Sunday River in Maine is humongous. I would be willing to bet, well, maybe not willing to bet, but I would be interested to see if Sunday River, Maine is bigger than Aspen Ski Resort. Anything about Aspen, and I think this is really the deal at all the ski places, is it's free. If you want to hike up the mountain, you are free to ski there, snowboard there. I'm pretty sure they allow snowboards now. They didn't used to. But you're free to ski there all you want without paying a dime if you hike up the mountain yourself. If you want a lift ticket, that's when it gets expensive. Come on. Dude, there's never anybody on this road. And now I gotta sit behind like 4 cars. What's up with that? So yeah, So Aspen was cool. There wasn't really much to do, but we checked it out anyway. It's always neat to check these places out, especially like a world-famous location like that. I saw so many ADV, like adventure kind of bikes, KLR 650 type bikes. Tons and tons of BMW GS adventure bikes. So many of those. Just ridiculous. If you're an adventure bike guy, little jump, how's your air? If you're an adventure bike guy, Colorado seems like the place to go. Which I can understand, because there's some pretty amazing scenery. We went hiking up this one mountain. This was a pretty intense thing. So there's this mountain called Storm King Mountain. And there's a memorial hike there. The reason why there's a memorial hike is because I believe it was July 6, 1994. There was kind of a small forest fire started, and there was basically a perfect storm of human error and arrogance caused it to get way out of hand. Basically, where it happened was kind of disputed territory between the Bureau of Land Management and I think it's the city or the county that Glenwood Springs is in. Anyway, so fire departments were arguing over whose responsibility it was. There was no cooperation between the departments. When it finally got to where they were actually fighting it, there were some smoke jumpers, heli-tac guys, and some hot shots, so the smoke jumpers parachute into it. Hot shots are the guys on the ground that are sent right in. They're the frontline fighters. And heli-tac guys, I think, are just I think they're basically sort of like hot shots that are dropped in by helicopters, maybe? I'm not quite sure. Long and short of it is, all three are badass people. Okay, these are people with some serious balls. A lot of people get called a hero for being in a situation where there could be heroism. These guys actually are heroes. There's no disputing it. So, and there were actually a couple women. So, there were 14 of them coming across this mountain, and the fire started getting out of hand. And they started kind of booking it across the face of this mountain. There were a few firefighters ahead of them, encouraging them, hey, hurry up, come up over the ridge. And unfortunately what happened is the brush was so thick they couldn't see where the fire was, and they're advancing across this ridge, unbeknownst to them, pretty much straight into hell. They got to the point where they would turn and go up the ridge, and they turned and started going up the ridge, but at that point the wind shifted. The fire came up the ridge at 32 feet a second. Okay, think about that. Think about how fast that fire traveled up that ridge. And they were in 8-foot thick oak sagebrush, I think is what it was. Oak brush, something like that. I'm sure one of my subscribers is probably a firefighter or maybe even a forest fire guy or girl. And maybe they can chime in on it. I'd love to hear more details, especially if they have any kind of first-hand wildfire experience, firefighting experience. So, unfortunately, they got caught in the fire, and 12 of them died there. 2 more, I believe the 2 that died over on the face of Storm King were heli-tac guys. They climbed into their fire shelters, and unfortunately the fire came up right over and through them, and man, if you're in your fire shelter, it can only do so much, and unfortunately it didn't save them. So 14 in all died. And this hike went up the mountain. It was pretty steep. And then it kind of came over the ridge, and as soon as it came across over the ridge, it got eerily quiet. And you could see the ground scarred from the fire. Even though it was in 1994, you could still see the evidence, the burnt stumps. A lot of just raw, open ground with small vegetation growing through it. It was pretty surprising for a fire that happened that long ago. And from the memorial point, you could hike off to the place where they actually died, and there were some small crosses where each of the bodies were found. And I'll tell you, the mood up there, it was just my wife and I, and it was the most intense feeling. I can't even really describe it. With it being just so quiet, and you know, just a little bit of wind noise. It was crazy. The trail that you can hike to where they actually died, they have left intentionally barely cut through and incredibly rugged to kind of give you not really I guess sort of an experience like what the terrain they had to fight the fire in. Of course, it still wasn't as overgrown as it was. It's still not as overgrown as it was when they were dealing with it. And of course, you also don't have a humongous, you know, 1,000+ degree fire coming up, screaming up the ridge at you. So that was pretty intense. It hurt my leg like hell to do that hike, but I don't know why, but I just really felt like I had to. I was like, I can't pussy out and turn around. You know, these people died up here fighting a fire. The least I can do is, in some small way, honor them by toughing it out and finishing the hike. And honestly, if I'm being honest, it really wasn't that bad until I was coming down towards the end. For some weird reason, my leg can handle going up just fine. It just can't handle coming down. I'm gonna get some gas. Talk to you guys after I get some gas. Alright, I got some gas. Talk to you guys a little more about this vacation. So, yeah, it was a pretty intense feeling fight. It was a pretty intense feeling hike. You know, I'm glad I finished it. Both, one, because I would have felt like a real pussy not finishing it, and two, because, you know, it was a good experience for my leg. Believe it or not, my leg held out pretty damn well. I was a little sore the next day, so I did what any sane person would do with their bad leg. I followed it up by a 16-mile bike, motherfucking bike, a 16-mile bicycle ride. I know, crazy, right? 16-mile bike ride with a fucked up leg? It really wasn't bad. It was down the canyon, down Glenwood Canyon. So a lot of it was downhill and flat. It wasn't a heavy bike, so it was pretty all right. There were a couple of uphill sections that they really sucked. The outfitters really and it might be because they're not used to dealing with somebody with a bad leg, but the outfitters were like, oh, it's almost all downhill. There are a couple flat sections and there's only one uphill and it's nasty. Well, there were 5 uphills that were worth mentioning. 3 of them were really nasty. One was, the one that they said is really nasty was ridiculous. I had to walk the bike up it. It would have sucked even with a good leg. I wasn't mad about that. I was mad that there were 5 uphills, not the one they mentioned. The barely any flats. Well, there was a lot of flat. I would say it was mostly flat. And it wasn't helped by the fact that in the afternoon there's a headwind coming up the canyon. And it's not just like a little bit of headwind, it's like a 25-mile-an-hour headwind. So you're basically riding uphill even when you're riding flat. And when you're riding downhill, it's still basically like you're riding flat. So the ride kind of sucked. The next day, I did jack shit. We really didn't do much of anything. I think the next day is the day that we drove out to Aspen. You know, we just kind of took it easy. My leg was pretty sore. It held up, you know, all in all, it held up better than I would have expected it to throughout the whole vacation. Went swimming in the hot springs pools. That was awesome. There are 2 of them. One is the cool pool, one's the hot pool. The cool pool is 93 to 95 degrees, and the hot pool is 104 on the one end, and it's got to be closer to 110 on the hot end. It was like you baked at the top end of that pool. So that was pretty much my vacation. I can't really think of what else we did. We went on a graveyard tour where Doc Holliday is buried. It's also the graveyard where they think Kid Curry was buried. Man, Kid Curry was a bad dude. There are some, people that like to romanticize the 1800s and the gunfighters and the bandits and stuff. But this guy legit killed like 18 people, I think it is. Pretty much just because they got in his way. Any kind of law enforcement people that came up on him, he just killed them. So he was, this was a bad, bad dude. A lot of people, if you read up on Doc Holliday, a lot of people are kind of the mind that he was a bit of a psychopath as well, because he killed a lot of people. And it wasn't like the movie Tombstone, where he's like one of the good guys and gets into law enforcement. He did that kind of stuff, but how he honed his skills as a gunfighter was he had tuberculosis, and he was bound and determined not to let the TB take him. So he did what anybody who has a disease and is crazy, and it's the 1800s, what many people would have done. He went out and basically picked gunfights with people, trying to basically die. And the part of that plan that didn't work out was that he was really good, which probably comes from the fact that he came from a rich family. He was educated, so he was smarter. He was probably more trained. He probably had better guns, so they were more accurate. He probably maintained his weapons better as well, which made them fire probably a little faster and more reliably. He did eventually end up dying of tuberculosis. It finally did take him, or as they called it back then, consumption. But there are a lot of really good books. If you're into reading books, if you're into history, which I've become a bit of a history buff, there are some really good books that kind of tell you the stuff that the movies don't tell you about Doc Holliday, and it's really neat. The story about the guys that died on Storm King Mountain, it was called the South Canyon Fire. There's a book called Fire on the Mountain. And it's not about the Grateful Dead song. It says it's like the true life story of the South Canyon Fire, I believe is what the book is called. But like I said, the title of the book's Fire on the Mountain. It's a New York Times bestseller book. I've started reading it. I'm about 50 pages in, and it's awesome so far. Non-fiction, so it's kind of dry if you're not into that sort of thing, but it's a pretty intense situation that they were in. So that's how my vacation went. I don't really have a whole lot else to talk about the vacation. Had a lot of good food. I ate at the same brew pub like 4 times because their food was good. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.